So the next step, very few minutes from now, will be to lower the basket from the recovery helicopter. The helicopter is now moving into place over the scene to pick up the astronauts. It will lower that basket into which they can climb one after the other. It's called the Billy Pugh basket, and you can crawl into it, climb into it, tumble into it, do almost anything, and no matter what happens, you probably will get into it one way or another. And it's so constructed that no matter what position you're in, it's easy for the men on board the helicopter to crank the basket up to the door of the helicopter and haul you inside. And that's what's happening to the astronauts, or will be any moment now.
These helicopters, normally, the Helicopter Squadron 4 normally is on anti-submarine duty. And the center of the compartment is normally taken up with sonar, but that's been taken out to make more room for the astronauts. Now, the first astronaut is in the basket just before being hauled up into the helicopter. And he's on his way. Halfway up? Well, that is minute-by-minute reporting. The first astronaut is in the basket and is halfway up.
That's practically breath by breath. Well, at the rate they're going, the other two ought to be in the helicopter within a very short time, just a couple of minutes, I imagine. Just the amount of time it'll take them to get the first astronaut out of the Billy Pugh basket and lower it away for the other two to make their way up to the helicopter. And after that, it will be directly back here to the flight deck and the welcome. And the skies are now are quite bright. Cloudy but bright, windy today. There still seems to be a hint of rain in the air. I wouldn't be surprised if we had a shower or two. In fact, I think I can see a shower off on the horizon somewhere, but it doesn't seem to be too close to the carrier. These showers have a wonderful way of springing up almost out of nowhere, and they're upon you before you know it. And they do have a way of decreasing the visibility sharply.
The first astronaut is in the helicopter. The basket's reached the top of the line, and he's been pulled into the helicopter and seated in the canvas bucket seats and strapped in, and the basket is now ready to descend and pick the second astronaut out of his yellow rubber raft. What was that?
Down here on the flight deck, the colors have been unfurled. The Stars and Stripes, flag of the United States Navy, flag of the Yorktown, standing by here, ready to take part in this ceremony. There is no band on deck today. We have had a band in quite a few of the other astronaut receptions, but for reasons that are probably best known to the Navy, no band sailed aboard the Yorktown when we left Pearl Harbor about a week and a half ago. Basket's going down for the second astronaut who was in the water, and the second astronaut is now on the way up.
And he's halfway up.
Yes, indeed. And guess what will happen then, Ron? The third astronaut will be on his way up.
And then we'll get a report that he's halfway up.
We're still waiting for that red carpet out here.
The second astronaut is in the helicopter now. So now there are two astronauts in the helicopter, and the last one waiting in the water for the basket to come down and pick him up. The basket's on its way down now. So Dallas, very shortly now, the helicopter, Recovery 3 helicopter, with Commander Jones at the controls, ought to be flying back toward the ship for these welcoming ceremonies that you've described. The basket's going down for the last time now. And what's happening? The basket's in the water. It's easy for a man to flop into these Billy Pugh nets. They used to use the horse collars, the yellow horse collars that you had to slip under your arms and across your chest. And they found that a lot of people who needed rescuing couldn't figure out how to get into these things, or slipped out of them, or wrenched their shoulders. So they've gone to using the Billy Pugh basket, and you just have to sort of roll toward it or flop into it, and you're caught inside. The third astronaut now is on his way up in the basket, and I know the next report we're going to hear is that it's halfway up.
We're having a stiff breeze out here on the flight deck. Now, Ron, they just unfurled the colors of the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, and they've whipped about bravely. They've pulled them back onto the staff now, so they don't get too much of a beating before the welcoming ceremony.
All the astronauts are inside the helicopter, Recovery Helicopter number 3, They've been taken out of their capsule after riding it for about 45, 50 minutes in the dark, taken into rubber rafts, raised one at a time into the helicopter. They're all in the helicopter now, and the helicopter should any moment now be heading back toward the aircraft carrier.
So it all turned out just exactly the way they expected. Ron, Recovery 3 had been expected to make the recovery, and it did. And this was the honor that Commander Don Jones had hoped for, the commanding officer of Helicopter Squadron 4. Probably heard that announcement on the loudspeaker system, stand by to recover 2 helicopters. The recovery helicopter is returning to the Yorktown, accompanied by the photo helicopter. Recovery helicopter with the 3 astronauts on board. And this will be number 66, piloted by Commander Don Jones with the 3 astronauts on board. And photo 1 will be number 51. That will be landing far forward on the flight deck, ahead of the Recovery 3 helicopter. Great activity, great excitement on the flight deck now. Everybody waiting for the first close-up sign of the helicopter. It should come around off the bow of the helicopter. Should come around off the bow of the helicopter and come in slowly for a landing. There will then be a brief pause while the rotors are stopped, and the platform, the steps, the wooden steps will be brought up to the door. The door will open. The astronauts will be greeted by John Stonecipher, head of the NASA recovery team, on board, and by Ben James, the senior NASA Public Affairs Administrator, on board, Public Affairs representative on board. Then Captain John Fifield, the commanding officer, will extend his welcome on behalf of the Yorktown.
About 3 minutes to the landing, Dellen.
Right. We can see the helicopter. That probably is the recovery helicopter, number 66, off to port, about a mile off to port right now. Coming around, came around the bow, is going down the left side. We brought up to the door. The door will open. The astronauts will be greeted by John Stonecipher, head of the NASA recovery team, on board, and by Ben James, the senior NASA Public Affairs Administrator, on board, Public Affairs representative on board. Then Captain John Fifield, the commanding officer, will extend his welcome on behalf of the Yorktown.
About 3 minutes to the landing, Dellen.
Right. We can see the helicopter. That probably is the recovery helicopter, number 66, off to port, about a mile off to port right now. Coming around, came around the bow, is going down the left side of the carrier, heading toward the stern, ready to make its approach. The sailors who formed the cordon have been moved back temporarily from the area on the flight deck, spot 3.5, where the helicopter will settle down onto the deck. They've been moved back down to the island superstructure.
The photo helicopter will be coming down first on the Yorktown's deck.
Yes, that's right. Here's the photo helicopter, number 51, Navy 51. It will put down very close to the bow of the carrier. Number 51.
Get through today?
Yes, sir, Captain. How are you? How do you feel?
Good.
That was Captain Fifield, commanding officer of the carrier Yorktown. He's standing out here now in his tropical white dress uniform with his ribbons and his naval aviator wings. Captain Fifield has had command of the Yorktown less than a year now and will soon be taking it around the Cape. Yorktown. Still waiting on the deck of the Yorktown for the moment when recovery helicopter number 66 piloted by Commander Don Jones, will make its appearance. The photo helicopter has landed. That's number 51. Has landed. Its rotors are stopping. And the great moment is approaching. The flight director is out there in his yellow jersey, standing forward of spot 3.5. He's the man who will guide the helicopter in, give it the correct signals to make sure that it touches down at the right spot on the deck. Number 66 is coming in. It's now coming up along the port side, along the left side of the carrier.